Welcome to Wave Watch. This is Patty V. We got It's Dave Rainey, the Dave Rainey. I confused the two because he's in another group called It's Dave Rainey. I'm sorry. This is the Dave Rainey. I'm the Patty V. This is Wave Watch. We're going to break down Tulane stuff like we always do. A lot of big things happening in Tulane world. 1 and 2 right now. That's probably not the big thing. 2 really hard fought losses. Coming off the backs of a loss to OU. I still don't know what the Sooner is, so maybe somebody could fill me in. But yeah, I mean, coming off of that, you got UL next week. Obviously, as always, we will talk a little bit about both. We may not go off the rails on both of those because we do have some other things we want to talk about as well.
UL this week.
That's what I meant. Next week, this week, okay. Whatever. You know,
just clarify.
OU and then UL is really what I'm getting at.
You have
guys.
UL next.
Next.
Yeah.
Up next.
UL,
who I don't really know their name. Are they supposed to be Louisiana? Or are they USL? I don't know. They have 20 names.
I'm calling them UL.
If you just rebrand yourself to Louisiana, is that allowed? Are we supposed to call you Louisiana now?
Puts off like little brother energy.
I hate it. Anyways, we'll get into that. Yeah. A lot of things to talk about. Do you want me to just hand it over to you? I know you had some things written down. We could just dive in.
Yeah, man. I think we should just keep this one pretty big picture as far as like the season outlook. We'll talk about the news that's going on right now. I don't think we need to really dive in to the game all that much.
A few days. Obviously, I would like to dive in more. Candidly, I didn't get to really break it down like I would others. I had a lot happen over the weekend, and I have not been able to get to it. And I apologize to you guys for that. But
yeah, I mean, overall, like just to give a rundown of, I have. If you really want to hear my initial thoughts on the game, we posted an immediate reaction. It's audio only, but it's on all the podcast things, so you can go listen to that. It was a game against an SEC school. You're right. Like
right.
For the first quarter, Tulane looked completely outmatched. Honestly, for the first half, for the majority of the first half, they looked completely outmatched. But somehow they stayed within 21, and actually they scored right before half. So they kept it close. It felt like a game where it could have been ugly in the first half.
Yeah.
And then similar to last week against Kansas State, but like in reverse order, it was a tale of two halves. They came out. They mentioned in the broadcast that Joe Craddock talked to they were having a lot of offensive line issues. Like you could see the communication wasn't there. He mentioned that they were going with a new cadence, and that seemed to turn the whole offensive round. They start moving the ball, and it looked a lot better. Mensa still struggled. It was definitely the worst game of Darren Mensa's career, which to be expected, but he still didn't look terrible.
Right.
I think it was more of a protection issue than him. That he missed some throws, but he didn't look bad at all. He's still there's still no doubts, in my opinion. But they got beat by a team that is better than them is the best way to put that. Where I think like Kansas State, I think they were more on par, even though Kansas State is higher ranked. I think they're more on par with Kansas State than Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I think Oklahoma just to that point had underperformed the first 2 weeks of the season, and they kind of just got it together.
Yeah. I think you shared a really interesting thing on the Who If Knows Twitter recently where it was like, hey, how bad did my team lose, right? And it was week 1, or not week 1, it was week 2 and week 3 now of the season. And it basically showed both of these were really close losses, right? Like it was very interesting. I don't know how they break that down where it's like, your team lost horribly or your team really had a hard fought game. And Tulane was right on the cusp both times, which was really interesting to see.
Yeah. Final score of this game isn't indicative of how close the game actually was. Now there were times where the game did feel like a 15-point game. Like it felt like more than that, but it was a close game for at least 50% of it. It was a good performance, man. Like you're playing a really good team. It kind of goes into the conversations that I've been having with people on the Twitter, in the fan base. And I made the point that it was kind of talking about the post that you're talking about, that although I think my wording was, although the overall goal of the season, the big picture, the big goal of the season is out of reach, meaning college football playoff. It's not 100% out of reach, to be clear, but realistically, your chances now are very slim. Even though that is out of reach, it doesn't mean that this is a lost season. And that's something we talked about I think every episode is that may be the big goal, but it doesn't mean if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that it's a lost season. And, then I'm getting into debates with people like it's still in reach and things like that. So what are your, let's get your thoughts on that. Do you think what are their chances now at a college football playoff? And do you think that it's a lost season now that it, in my opinion, feels out of reach?
Lost season, no, definitely not a lost season. I'll just get that out of the way first. Out of reach, it's an uphill battle, right? Like you can sit here and we could do butterflies and rainbows and be optimists, which is great. You need to be optimistic, and I am optimistic. I'm optimistic about the team and its future. I think though that you've put yourself in a hole. I mean, you had to take one of these two games against these Power 5 schools in order to have a real shot. Or to really have a concrete shot. Let's put it that way. Like if you would have won one of these games, it's not really even a question come the end of the year, right? You're in the conversation. Now, even if you win out, which you have a good chance to, but even if you win out, there's still that question. If there's another team, say from the Mountain West or the Sun Belt or any of these other conferences that no matter how you look at them, if they win out, they're in the conversation because you didn't. Like if, so it's tougher.
Yeah, they were, I think ESPN on the broadcast showed them as like the fourth team going into that game against Oklahoma, and they had them as a 10% chance. However they do that math, I don't know, but that's what they had. But right now, like you have Memphis is ahead of you, and which you can handle Memphis yourself. Like right now, if you're a Tulane fan, you're pretty much pulling for Memphis to go undefeated until you meet them. Yeah, because then that's the only chance you really have in a ranked opponent. The rest of the way, unless somebody else gets hot, of course. But you can beat Memphis in the last week of the season, and then you'd have to play them again the next week and beat them again, and then that's a good look, and you win the AAC. That's all Tulane can do as far as their control. But then you got Northern Illinois, who just beat Notre Dame.
Yeah,
you got Boise, UNLV. Boise almost upset Oregon. UNLV's undefeated. App State, Coastal Carolina, Liberty, all those teams are still ahead of you now. Now things are going to work themselves out. They may not all stay hot. We're only a couple weeks, 3 weeks into the season.
Yeah.
But it's an uphill battle now. But I agree with you. It's absolutely not a lost season at all.
Yeah. Not at all. I think where it gets tough too is, and this is what some of the fans are going to look at and get frustrated at the end of the year, right? Maybe say the teams like Memphis, UNLV, NIU, those teams all have one loss, right? And then you have a Liberty or you have an App State or somebody like that goes undefeated. I don't know if App State goes undefeated, but still. And they're the ones getting looked at for the playoff. And you're like, but that team sucks. Like if we play them on a neutral site, we beat them by 20, right? Yeah. But it doesn't matter.
Nope.
It doesn't matter because you didn't take care of business early on.
Right. And that was my overall point. Like people are like, these were close losses. And I'm like, yes, but the record shows 1-2.
Right. Which is tough. Like we're not an SEC school. You can't say, oh, we're 1-2, even if we win out. Like if we win out, we're in. No, it's not how it works. You're in the AAC.
Yeah. And there was a questionable coaching decision in this game. But especially last week, you can really look at the end of that game and be like that. If one call goes a certain way, maybe things are different. Or if they make a different play, like that game, you can really look at and be like, that was a winnable game. This one feels like a loss, but it doesn't feel like a bad loss, but it's not the Kansas State game where I'm like, we should have won that game. This one, I'm like, this was an uphill battle all game. It would have been a miracle to win it. Whereas you look at Kansas State and it's like, that could have been a win.
I think the thing is though, with this one, what bums me out at least is you put yourself in a position, right? Like you get the pick six, shout out Grubbs, you get the pick six and you're in a good position to go have an opportunity to win the game. And then it doesn't work out.
Just stop throwing the ball. The back of the fan, I said I didn't want to dive deep into this game, but I got to acknowledge it because it seemed like the majority of the fan base was on this one. Maybe it was seeing it 2 weeks in a row that got them, but it's funny because again, there was a missed pass interference call, like an obvious one. And, but again, it's 3rd and 1. Mackay had just ripped off a couple nice runs. We'll see if that's a theme throughout the season, but when you need 1 yard, I think you trust your best player to go get it. And it's really starting to frustrate me. It already frustrates me when teams just do that in general, but I feel like it cost you one game. in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And
you could say it did. I mean,
I don't know that it cost them in this game because they still have to go all the way, halfway down the field at that point. But it definitely didn't help them to try to throw it again. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm just getting frustrated by it. Keeping with the big picture thing, what's the new goal of the season?
I mean, you have to win the conference. You have to. That has to be the goal, right?
So we're saying this isn't a lost season yet. Is it a lost season if they don't win the conference, or is it a lost season if they just completely fall off the rails and the record goes scrap?
It's really tough. It's not a lost season if you don't win the conference, but you definitely don't feel good about it. You don't. And it's because of the talent that you've seen on this team and how good they looked through the first few weeks here. Mm-hmm. If you now come out in the conference play and you struggle and you don't look good, it's not going to feel good. Yeah. No matter what your record is at the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the schedule, like maybe I'm sure there's some bias to this thought, but up until Memphis, they feel like they should be the most talented team on the field. Like, I think Tulane should be favorited the rest of the way until Memphis. Like, Memphis is a good team. We can't pretend like Memphis isn't a good team.
Yeah.
And that's been your challenge the last couple of years is Memphis. So it's like, if you lose the conference to if you have to win these other games.
Sure.
Like, you need to go on a run starting Saturday. Mm-hmm. But if you lose to Memphis, I'd like to see them win, at the very least, win the last one at Memphis. But if you don't beat Memphis 2 times in a row, I'm not going to say that's a lost season. Even if you don't win the conference, that's tough, man. Back-to-back weeks, beating a good team. We're looking way ahead now, but if that's how this plays out, they win out, beat Memphis in the last week of the season, you have to beat them again in the championship. That's a tough.
That's fair. I understand where you're coming from, and it is hard to beat a team back-to-back. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. It just feels yucky. Either way, it feels yucky.
That's fair. But overall, for me, this has been about, once Darian Mensah showed that he is a hit, mm-hmm. this became about the future. Granted, some of these transfers you have may not be here as long as him, as far as the receivers and things like that. But when you found you had a guy at quarterback, this becomes if you have a quarterback in college football, you have a chance. As long as you have a above average talent around him, mm-hmm. Because he's this good right now, he's only going to get better. And then you won't need 5-star receivers all around him for him to be good.
Right.
So it's for me, it's all looking towards the future here. I would hope, this is super long term, but in his 3-4 years here, I think a playoff appearance, even if it's the 12th seed, I think that needs to happen. If he continues this trajectory and he lives up to some of this hype that he's getting now, I almost feel like it have to, because you just came off a Cotton Bowl appearance a couple years ago with a guy who is at least on par with where Mensah is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like I'm not putting my thoughts perfectly together here, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think the trajectory he's on, you expect it eventually, right? I know we were talking about this year, but you're kind of looking ahead. You expect it in his career here as long as he stays here.
Yeah.
Which I think that's fair with the expansion of the playoff and things of that sort. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to shake out over these next few years, probably this year, that are going to change some things as well. But I think it's realistic to expect that.
Yeah. And that's a good way to transition into unless there's anything else you want to say about UL, we can just transition into
we didn't even talk about UL.
I mean, to be fair, I know UL's undefeated right now, but it feels like a game Tulane should win. I know it's on the road. UL, they're undefeated. They got to be somewhat of a good team, right? I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about UL football, but it just feels like a team they should beat.
Yeah.
And we'll see. If you lose this week, then I think you start having some doubts about things.
Well, isn't UL's defense pretty tough? I mean, it's still UL. It's still a Sun Belt team, but I mean, people probably look at Tulane like that, right?
Yeah, but when they compete with Kansas State, when you compete with the 15th ranked team and the 18th ranked team in the country, And like you could have definitely beat one and you could have potentially beat the other one. Unless there's always that potential of like now it's like a hangover. Like how do these guys, that's what I'm looking for this week against UL.
Right.
How do they bounce back knowing that the overall goal may not be within reach? Like, do they still stick to this plan? Like, you're going to learn a lot about how Coach Summerall can pull this team together and get them to compete.
I mean, if history shows anything, he's done this before, right?
Yeah.
Like
I'm not doubting him, but you're going to learn. Maybe learn more about the guys on the team than him. So that's really what I'm like. This game is what it is. Everything for me now is like big picture. And speaking of big picture, a lot of news going on right now.
I was trying to pull stuff up. Go ahead.
Do what you gotta do. I can talk.
That's all right.
A lot of stuff going. A lot of news going on right now. A lot of smoke around conference realignment.
Yeah.
Do we want Tulane in the Pac-12?
Abso-friggin-lutely we do. Listen, there's people out there that are like, oh, maybe you hold on. The Pac-12 is still not a great conference. The travel and is it going to be monetarily worth it? I don't care. You do what you can now. And I've said this all along. You do what you can now to get into a power conference. And the Pac-12 is still a power conference. They still get an automatic bid and they still get more revenue than what your conference is getting.
There's been some debate about this automatic bid thing.
Yeah.
I was talking to I forget who it was on Twitter. One of the guys, the guy that does all the stats.
Yeah.
Blanking on his name.
Pop.
Yeah. I think it was him I was talking to. He states that it's not the Power 4 conferences that get automatic bids. It's just 4 conference champions. So realistically, if the 4 highest ranked conference champions were from the AAC, the Sun Belt, like it's never going to happen. But it's not necessarily the Power 4 conferences that get automatic
and then
bids.
it's like an at-large technically is the
and even if you go to the NCAA site and read it, it isn't super clear. It's like there's 5 automatic bids, but it doesn't necessarily say. It doesn't say SEC, Big Ten, ACC. Like
even if we take that into account, I respect that because he knows what he's talking about. So I'm gonna give him a lot of credit there. I think joining a conference like the Pac-12, first of all, your schedule is way better.
Yeah.
Right. You're respected a little bit more, even if the Pac-12 is looked at as maybe like the stepsister, power conference. You're getting in front of more eyes. You're playing tougher teams.
Well, to yes and no. From that, like I'm not really disagreeing with anything you're saying because right now it's only Oregon State and Washington State. If the word on the street or the rumors are Memphis, Tulane, and some mixture of UTSA, USF. I think Boise is actually going to be joining. Fresno, or San Diego State, and Fresno State, I think, are also going to join.
Yeah,
which those schools feel on par with Tulane, but at the same time, they're better than the majority of the schools in the AAC.
Absolutely.
So you are joining a better conference, but you're not playing Big Ten opponents. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with everything you're saying.
So I'm looking at it like this, and I know this is kind of crazy, right? In 2025, the out-of-conference opponents that Tulane has are Ole Miss, Duke, South Alabama, and Northwestern. If you add those to a Pac-12 conference made up of those teams, your strength of schedule is instantly better than anything you will ever see in the American Athletic Conference.
Yeah. Just by adding Oregon State and Washington State on there. And then you still keep Memphis. UNLV looks to be on track, assuming they go. San Diego State is always like a solid, like little team. I agree. I like the Pac. I know a lot of people want ACC, but listen, as a member, a fan of a team in the ACC, they have the worst television deal, like of all of these conferences.
Yeah,
it's like it's looked at as a terrible television deal, better than what Tulane has,
right?
But
so, and that is one of the biggest questions right now that I hear pushback on is like, what is the television deal going to be for the Pac-12? People are putting it anywhere from 12 million to 20 million. Like there's no real idea yet.
But also like the good teams in the ACC are actively trying to get out of it.
Yeah, that's scary.
Like Florida State, it's if you follow this kind of stuff, Florida State wants out. Clemson is one of the teams that's going to want out. North Carolina wants out. And then like the big team there is Miami, which looks like a good team right now. But like if those 3 teams leave, why would Miami want to stay?
Yeah.
Like Miami's not a brand, especially if they're good, that can be in a small conference like that. So it's like I think your better chance is going to the Pac-12 and trying to just rejuvenate that conference.
I think that no matter what, you're in a better position than where you are now. I think that's what I'm getting at.
For sure.
And the flip side is people wanting to wait for the ACC, which is kind of what you're talking about. And I agree that like you don't know what you're getting if you wait for and there's no guarantee that you even go to the ACC.
Yeah.
And if you're hoping for the SEC, you're gonna be hoping for a long dang time. I think you got to just take the jump when you can, leap when you can, and then you take another leap 5 to 10 years from now if there's an opportunity.
Yeah, and I listen, as good as Tulane's been, I don't want the SEC. I think like if you join the SEC, does that immediately get you SEC level recruits?
No, I mean, it helps.
You know what I'm saying? Like if you go to the Pac-12, you get a tougher schedule, like a respectable schedule, and you'll be competitive in that one and can win it. If you go to the SEC and you have to face like a real SEC schedule, like go look at Florida's schedule right now and tell me how you think Tulane would fare against that.
It'd be tough.
You know? And like, I'm not trying to crap on Tulane. I'm being realistic here. Like maybe 10 years down the road in the SEC, you build up, but are you willing to sit through 5 years of being like a laughingstock of the SEC?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So like it's tough. You know,
I think there's a lot of other things that come with it as well, though. It's first of all, the money coming in is going to help immediately, right? But Tulane can't even get a dang bubble built on their campus right now. So there's a lot of things that I'm concerned about.
Also, man, for some reason, I just think the Pac-12 would be fun.
Absolutely.
Like if we're taking like a simple approach to this, just put yourself in a seat here. It's midnight on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Tulane's beating the brakes off of UNLV in Vegas.
Yeah.
Peppers is playing in the distance.
Yeah.
That's a fun time, man. Listen, I don't know how most people feel. I am here for 9:00 Tulane kickoff.
Absolutely. Listen, here's the problem. There's a lot of Tulane fans that are elderly.
Yeah, that's true.
So, they're kind of looking at it like that's past their bedtime.
And I don't know if we would get 9:00 kickoffs here, but I'd also be down for that.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing is that if you look at the teams they're adding, this conference is going to span time zones. So there's going to be multiple kickoff slots. It's not going to be all late night games.
The majority are West Coast.
Sure.
In mountain time.
Sure.
In Pacific time.
But it won't all what I'm getting at is it's not as much as you think.
Also, but if they're of the teams that are in talks to join, they're not even in the worst position as far as that goes. Memphis and USF. Like you want to talk about Tulane, USF, that's a hike, brother.
You're staying up till 1 a.m. buddy, watching a football game.
No, admittedly, I'm somebody that's up all night anyway, so I'm down to watch Tulane at 9:00.
I don't care.
Yeah,
it's a weekend. I got nothing to do. I got to get up for church. It'll be fine.
Overall, you're right. If the opportunity, you don't wait. If the opportunity is there, and if the offer is good, you go, man. Like the AAC is clearly a conference that's not going in. Like you're not going anywhere in the AAC.
Yeah.
You're going to be where you're at.
Also, we can call this out too. They're clearly in defense mode right now. I mean, they're putting out statement after statement. They're visiting Memphis. Like you could tell that they are preparing for some defections. So,
well, they just announced they're adding Air Force.
Yeah.
You don't add teams without the thought of
teams leaving.
And I'm a real believer in when there's this much smoke, there's something going on. I think it's pretty safe to say Memphis is a lock. And they're not taking just one team.
Yeah.
So you look around, what are the other teams in the AAC that are on par with Memphis that would make the Pac-12 look like a real conference?
Yeah. At the moment, Tulane's definitely on the list.
Right. If you just look at the trajectory of like the teams, it's Memphis and Tulane. UTSA's had some solid years, but it's like those are the two. And I think they want Tulane. I think it's a matter of whether Tulane wants to go.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's just,
this stuff fascinates me.
I want to believe that the school wants to go, but I've heard whispers otherwise. And maybe it's people just trying to put out fires, but it blows my mind. And it goes back to, this is why you see on Twitter all the time, we talk about this off camera all the time, how Tulane fans are just so negative sometimes. And the reason is stuff like this, because they have seen time and time again where just the heads of these departments are just like, we don't care. We don't care about football that much. We're not going to do this, this, and this. We're going to do this instead. And it long term really is a detriment sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's been some of the pushback that I've seen, like just in replies to these things. It's like, does football matter that much? Like, are you willing to, like, what matters more to them? And some of these people are like, you don't do this for football. Like, I think we're looking at this as football fans.
Well, basketball wise, this is also a great move.
So that's the thing. Do they also go for basketball? Because there's teams like Notre Dame is in the ACC for basketball, but they're independent in football.
Yeah.
There's schools that do that. So does this mean, are they going for everything?
I don't know.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
All the talk, it's football season. So all the talk is about football.
It'd be interesting to see, because that's kind of what killed the Big East when Tulane was going to join the Big East, and then it became the American Athletic Conference. Like, there was a lot of back and forth. And they can't join. Like, some of those basketball teams were like, no, you're not joining our conference. You're not good enough. And then they just kind of did their own thing.
Yeah, I love this stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah,
like I really hope it happens. Granted, I don't fully understand the business side of it and like how it affects academics, but in my brain, if you do this, it can only be positive.
If you only look at the money, right? If we only look at the money, in my opinion, it just comes in how much money is the TV contract going to come back to for Tulane? Is it worth paying to travel? Is the exposure worth it for the school? Are they going to get more students coming to their school because of it? Like, these are the little things that are going to matter monetarily. I understand the school and their mindset behind academics, because listen, Tulane has traditionally been looked at as an academic school. So do they want to, point a line in the sand, so to speak, and say, no, like, this is too much for our athletes. They're going to not have as good of grades, blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But don't be dumb.
Yeah, man. Like, what are some of the complaints that we have about like Tulane football over the years? One of them is like, we get these head coaches that make the team good and then they leave.
Yeah.
You want to get them to stay? Do something like this.
Yeah.
You go to the Pac-12, those conversations aren't happening.
Yeah, you're not worried about Summerall leaving to go to the ACC or like some or a Pac-12 team.
Your worries are like Big Ten and SEC.
Yeah, it's like LSU's calling.
Yeah.
Well, shit, LSU calls any coach, it's going to be a conversation. Like,
exactly. LSU might be calling somebody here too. It's just like, and then my other thought is like, if they do this and the money's good, does the money go back into football?
Yeah.
Like, that's something I worry about. Or do they like you said, they're an academic school. Does it go more into the other stuff? And we still hear the same complaints. You can't go to the Pac-12 and then things remain the same. As far as like, we're talking about this bubble. Like, if you get the Pac-12 money and it's good and that doesn't show up, like if you don't start seeing real improvements.
I'm connecting dots in my head, and this is literally just conspiracy theories now in my own head.
I love
it. Are they putting a pause on the bubble? Because they have kind of paused the bubble, which they did before, and that's why Willie left. Willie got really frustrated with them, and it seemed like they were doing it again with Summerall because they had said they were doing it. But there's been whispers that maybe they're gonna take over that lot that's on Claiborne. And in my head, I'm like, well, if they join the Pac-12 and they get more money, their donors aren't going to just be like, no, like some of these boosters aren't going to just be like, no, it's okay. You don't have to put money into the football program. They're going to want a successful football program because they do now.
Yeah.
Do they then turn around and make like a full on complex on Claiborne? Because there's a lot more room there that you can do stuff like that with.
Yeah. Listen, man, I'm all for it. Like there's not any argument you can make to me to be like, no, unless you have another offer from another conference.
Yeah,
that's better. And even then, like I said, I think that looking at the ACC, it feels like a conference that's failing and falling apart.
You could argue Pac-12 already did fail and fall apart,
right? But do you want to be a part of one that may build back up, or do you want to join the one
that is
that's falling, that's failing?
Yeah,
like it's clear, like it is no secret. FSU wants out, and that's the first domino. When they leave, no, it's rarely one team leaves.
Yeah.
Right. So if you lose the top two teams, FSU and Clemson, in the recent history, that's a wrap, man. And you don't want to be a part. Then it's you at SMU again. Like you're in the same position you were just in.
Shit.
Right?
Yeah.
At least you're not paying to go to the ACC.
Good job, guys.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid for years. Also, Florida State, if Florida State continues to lose here, like, are they hurting their case? Not that, like, technically they're not, but like,
I look at it differently because it's funny because like Miami's arrow is pointing up.
mhm.
I look at it as brands. Like Florida State is a brand.
Yeah.
Clemson, even if they're not a top team, is a brand. Like, and then if you start talking basketball, you want North Carolina.
Yeah.
Right. Like those 4 teams, Memphis or Miami, North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson, like you want those teams in your conference.
Yeah.
Like those are recognizable logos. Those bring in money. Like Miami has talked about even when they're bad. Florida State has talked about even when they're bad. Like you want those teams. So, I don't think it necessarily matters.
Yeah. Fair point. I just had to ask.
Yeah. That's just like maybe that there's some bias on that for me too, but
no, it makes sense. I mean, they're definitely brands. I mean, everybody knows Florida State. Everybody knows Miami. Everybody knows Clemson. Everybody knows North Carolina. Like, yeah.
That's it. That's what I got. And if Memphis goes, this is another thing. Tulane has to go. That is my least favorite thing about conference alignment is breaking up these.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it an iconic rivalry, but it's our rivalry.
Yeah.
Like that's the same thing with like when Florida State leaves. You can't break up Florida State, Miami. Like that's the sad part about all of this is you start to break up some of these rivalries. That's what was cool about Oklahoma and Texas going is you can continue that.
Mm-hmm.
So if Memphis goes, like I want to see Tulane go. Like I want that to continue. And then yes, Tulane UNLV rivalries, and we get to go to Vegas.
I'm on board.
Like
I would love it.
I get the travel thing. Granted, we're not the athletes, but there's just something cool about going to Oregon State and playing. Like I find that fun, and it's just like an interesting. And then Oregon State coming here. It's different teams, dude.
Listen, I've been scrolling Twitter, and all the Pac-12 folks that are watching the Pac-12 like look at these different schools. They're like, we get to go to New Orleans.
Yeah,
hell yeah,
yeah. Or and USF, we get to go to go to Memphis, Florida, or South Florida, and New Orleans. Hell yeah,
yeah.
Listen, man. And then UTSA, what is that? Austin,
San Antonio. Yeah, still a fun little city.
Absolutely, man. I'm all for it. Listen, locations and conferences they're irrelevant now.
Yeah,
you got to get that out of your brain. Like that doesn't matter anymore.
Every conference, it's like that now.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Cool.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's it. We've been going for a minute. Let's wrap this up. We may have some fun stuff coming for you over at Who Effing Knows, because this weekend we are going to the UL game, taking a little road trip, a little trippy trip.
Yep.
I know you're following us here, but definitely go follow us there for some fun content from this weekend.
2 weeks in a row. It's like the battle of Who Effing Knows.
Yeah, I know.
For those who don't know, Aaron is an Oklahoma fan and a UL fan. So
yeah, our buddy that is all. Well, there's 3 of us now. If you haven't seen the Who Effing Knows podcast in a while, maybe you saw us there originally. There's 3 of us now, and our new buddy, our new friend over there is definitely.
Yep. Yeah. So hoping to go 1-1 against him.
Yeah. Screw that guy.
Yeah.
I bet or something.
And I believe our plan is to still do an instant reaction on the way home.
Yes,
as long as things work out technology wise. So still be on the lookout for that. Go follow us we push the YouTube all the time. Go follow us on Apple and Spotify, wherever you listen to your pods, because those are audio only. So go check them out and listen. I'll brag a little bit. Audio quality is great. Go listen to it.
Yeah.
And they're easy listens. They've been 10 to 15 minutes, short, sweet, to the point.
Yeah. Eventually it's just going to be Dave crying into the microphone. So.
Probably. Listen, it is what it is, man.
It depends how the season goes. I don't think we're quite there. Hopefully we won't ever be there.
Not yet, man.
But yeah, that's really it. Make sure you follow Nat Be in the Know everywhere too. Wave Watch is obviously always going to be out on those platforms, especially YouTube. So yeah,
that's it.
Appreciate it.
Roll wave.
Roll wave.